Welcome back to the channel, everyone. This is the Ultimate Review. What the Ultimate Review is where I review a whole book series of, books, and I talk about each one of them. Instead of doing one video for per book, I just want to review the whole book series. And today is going to be Lord of the Rings. I'm pretty excited to get into Lord of the Rings. Now, it's one of my all-time favorite fantasy books of all time, well, series. It's also one of my favorite movie trilogy of all time. Like, I might make some references of comparing the books to the movies while talking about this because it's really hard not to talk about the movies and talk about the books. Does that make sense? Like, I'm a pretty big Lord of the Rings fan in general. Like I said, I remember when I was 7 years old and I watched The Two Towers and I was just blown away. I had no idea what was going on, but I remember it was just epic. Like, holy crap. Like, the Battle of Helm's Deep in that movie just blew my mind when I was 7. I was just like, what? Through the whole time watching it. So, yeah, it really holds a lot of nostalgia for me. And it's funny because I always watched the movies growing up. I never actually read the books until I was about 22. I know, crazy. But I don't know. I just never wanted to read them for a weird reason. But I also wasn't a really big reader when I was growing up. There was only a few series I actually read growing up. One was the Percy Jackson series. Another was a series of Unfortunate Events. And then after that, I never really got into reading. And now as an adult, I actually been reading a lot of these books I wish I read when I was younger. And it's like they don't hold the same meaning as they did. I wish they probably would have as well growing up, but all in all, I still enjoy these kind of books. Now, Lord of the Rings, I read it and I loved it, and I haven't done a reread in a long time. It's just I'm really weird about rereads, so I might do like the audiobook version. I might do that instead because why not? I guess that's my little origin story of what got me into Lord of the Rings and how I read it and so on and so forth. But now I'm like a big fan of Lord of the Rings. I even have Tolkien's signature behind my ear because it's dope, and it's his signature in Elvish, which is really cool. I was told that's a really cool way to, pick up chicks. Just saying. That's so dumb. Oh. The Fellowship of the Ring is a lot different than the movie. It's a lot slower. You are in the Shire way longer, which is actually really cool. So in the movie, you're only in the Shire probably for about probably like 20-25 minutes, something like that. You're not in there for a long time because obviously it's a movie, not a book. And if it was a TV show, I'm sure they would have dragged it out probably for like 2 episodes, maybe. Anyways, though, in the book, you're in the Shire for a while. And I'm not even kidding. You're in there for like years. Like, Frodo was literally in there for like 50 years. Because what happens is, Bilbo has the ring, and Gandalf finds out about the ring. We all know the gist. And, Bilbo then gives the ring to Frodo, and so on and so forth. Well, we know that part. But you might not know that during the Fellowship, like when Gandalf's like, this ring, and he's like, I have to go, and then he just leaves. He's gone for like 50 years. Like, this man is gone. Like, it still cracks me up to this day that Gandalf's like, I'll be back, and Frodo's just like, okay, dude, when are you coming back? You know what I'm saying? And then one day, Gandalf just shows up years later and it's like, all right, Frodo, we got to go now. And it's like, dang, dude. So it's like those parts is just it to me. It just cracks me up now, like reading it because it's like, dang, you're telling me Frodo like was just chilling for 50 years. And another thing I really like about it is if you didn't know what hobbits were, which I think I wish I don't know how, but I wish I could have read the Lord of the Rings before I watched the movie. Like I said, I don't know how, but I could imagine like reading this book for the first time and you don't really know what hobbits are. So when he explains these little small creatures, you're like, oh, interesting. Like, I don't know, it's just such a cool thing of when you're like first time reading it, you're like, man, these hobbits can live for a long time. And you just sit there and think, This is so interesting. And you don't really know, like, I don't know, it's just the whole time I'm reading it, it just was so cool. And mind you, now I'm thinking about it, it wasn't 50 years, but still, I'm just saying it was a long time. It's just, it was just a cool concept through it all. And it still cracks me up that rereading this, well, reading the book, is Gandalf still just like sends Frodo off. And of course, Sam overhears the whole thing. The goat, Sam was the goat of Lord of the Rings. I don't think that's even a hot take. Like, Sam is the reason why Middle Earth is saved. Just saying. Sam's there, of course. What is Frodo gonna do without a Sam? There's always Sam. You always need a Sam in your life. Just letting everyone know, if you're down in the dumps and you have a friend like Sam, you lean on that shoulder because Sam is gonna take you out of those dumps. I'm telling you, man. Sam is that dude. So of course, Frodo and Sam leave at night to from the Shire, and then you get Mary, not Mary like Merry Christmas, not Mary like Marianne, Mary. And you get Pippin, and of course those two are great. I like those two, but like of course you got the four of them that are yeah, they are traveling. And the whole time when you're reading this, it's like I said, Tolkien's writing is very slow paced. It's very detailed in the world, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're used to reading modern fantasy and just reading newer books, this is going to take you out of it because it's just slower paced. But if you really just sit there and just absorb it all in, just the magic of this world is just so unique and beautiful that's really hard for you wanting to just be like, all right, we're done. And I understand that some people probably struggle with that. I think you could just do an audiobook and still be fine. But to me, reading it was just so magical. Like, you just being in this world is just, I don't know, it's really hard for me to read other fantasy worlds and just feel like I'm just developed in it. Because the way how Tolkien writes everything is just so great. And there's a reason why a lot of people say he's like the godfather of fantasy, because just the way he writes paragraphs about, he writes literally about trees for a paragraph, and you're like, that's a tree? Like the whole time. And I just think it's so special reading these books. And to me, I really love that writing. Like I said, I haven't reread Lord of the Rings. I might do it next year. We'll see. I'm currently reading The Wheel of Time, and that's like the new age of Lord of the Rings, I guess. Whatever. Anyways, but with Lord of the Rings in general, like I'm trying to like continue talking about the Fellowship of the Ring, but it's like it's hard too because everyone has watched the movie or read the book, so it's like it's hard to review it. And I would rather just honestly just talk about all the things I really enjoy about all three of them. Now, personally, I think Fellowship is the best book of the three. Now, movie wise, I think that's the Two Towers. Just saying. And that's the thing too. I think that's one of Tolkien's weakest parts is he's so good at writing these detailed descriptions of things, of characters talking, and just the world building in of itself. But when it comes to the battles are kind of weak. And I don't think that's a bad thing because it's not about the battles, it's about the journey along the way. And it's very very in your mind of the way he writes. And I really enjoy that. Like, you can, it blows my mind still because I every year I rewatch Lord of the Rings. Every December I rewatch them because I love Lord of the Rings. And you could watch those movies and appreciate the battles and stuff, and you can appreciate like characters and stuff through those books. I mean, through the movies. But the books, that's where you really start to enjoy the characters and the descriptions of the world and just how old and rich this world is without knowing why. Like, you sit there and think a little bit in the back of your mind, you're like, why is this there? Why? But then at the same time, you think about it a little bit, and then you just keep going along with the story because these characters kind of briefly talk about it, but then they just continue on. And I think that's just so cool. I love the way he writes these. And the more I keep talking about it, it just makes me want to read them. Who knows? Maybe I will. Maybe in January or like February, I'll reread them because, man, now I'm just like, wow. But yes, like the way you think about this world and how he builds these characters, even the characters written are really well. Except, I will say, I think the movie did one thing better, and that is including Gimli and Legolas a lot more. Granted, anyone could say this, but I'm just saying, Frodo and Legolas, I don't think they ever said a word to each other. Just saying, I don't think they ever said a word to each other. Anyways, I just think the way he wrote all these characters were so good, and he really showed, I think, through all of it, I think, is while reading these, it actually shows a struggles of what some characters deal with, like what a lot of men deal with, especially accepting certain things. Like you get to deal with the subject of like depression with like Frodo, and how he writes Frodo is so interesting. Like I said, a lot of people, like myself, never really liked Frodo growing up because I didn't really understand it. But now as an adult, I actually understand what is going through Frodo's mind, his moods, and everything, the way he acted towards Sam, and how he picked Gollum slash Smeagol over Sam. And it's just so well written in a way where you're like, wow, you actually can relate with Frodo through all these. The same thing with Aragorn. Aragorn cannot accept becoming the new king. It's something he just doesn't want to do. That's a lot of weight, and it's more he's just scared. And I think that's just such a cool concept in a way to write it. Because like in the movie, he doesn't really like talk about. I didn't know until I read the book that Aragorn's just kind of running away from his own destiny in a way. And I think that's so powerful. It's just so cool. Like I think it's just such an awesome way to write characters. And obviously now reading newer fantasy, there is a lot of those tropes. So for me, when I'm reading like Lord of the Rings for the first time, I was seeing all these pieces that everyone else was inspired of writing. And it was just I loved it. I loved it so much reading these things. And I just think Lord of the Rings is just such a beautiful trilogy that it's like it's hard to say which one's the best, even though I did say Fellowship is. I think Fellowship is the best for the fantasy role thing. Like if you like D&D, the Fellowship is the definition of what D&D is. And then the rest of it is just the POVs. My only problem is once they split, once they split, I think they should have done every other chapter. So you have one trio, and then the other chapter is Frodo and Sam, like that flip flop. Because in this, it doesn't do that. It's the first half in the Two Towers with one group, and then the other half is with the other group. And it felt really sluggish because you're with Sam and Frodo, who are just walking most of the way, and the other guys are all doing these wild, cool things. So for a first time reader, you're like, oh man, this is so boring. But then you actually read it, and you're like, it's actually not like you actually learn a lot more with these things while reading it. And I don't know, maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just because I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan. But those moments I've been reading, when I would read the Sam and Frodo chapters now, it leaves a special place in my heart because it's just the way he writes Frodo and Sam, especially like I did say, Sam is probably the best character in the Fellowship, but I think the best character overall is Smeagol because Smeagol is just so misunderstood, and I love it. He is battling with so many things. The way he got tormented by the ring, the way he just deals with these issues that I just it just makes me so sad. And Spiegel is just so well written through it, where he finally, in a way, he is like, yes, Sam carries Frodo, literally carries him, but Spiegel also is the one that kind of like saves everyone by his own greed, by his own selfish desire to wind this ring. He, in of himself, dies to save everyone. It's just like a bittersweet feeling, I guess. Because like while I was reading this, I actually thought Smeagol was gonna stay good, but he ended up just being Gollum eventually, and I'm like, dang. It's just I love the way he writes these books. These books are so good. I will say, my only thing I did not like in the books, because I didn't even know this, is the ending when the hobbits going back to the Shire. That's the only thing I didn't like. I did not like that. I was like, oh man. So I'm kind of glad the movies never did that. But just saying, other than that, I really love this trilogy. I think it's one of the greatest trilogies of all time. It's one of the greatest fantasy series of all time. It's just there's a reason why it is. There's a reason why everyone picks it as one of their favorites every time when you see top 10 favorite fantasies. And it's always Lord of the Rings. Like we all know why. And every time you talk to people about it, it's just everyone has different opinions and different ways of why they love this stuff. And I just think it's so awesome. I love talking to people about Lord of the Rings. It's one of my favorite pastimes, and it makes me feel sad as a Lord of the Rings fan that I haven't read all the other stuff yet. I want to. I was thinking about reading the Silmarillion eventually. I might have just pronounced it wrong. I want to read it. I own the book, but I was told how you read it. You have to read it kind of like how the Bible's read, where you only read like one chapter a day. So I might do that because it's just all these short stories. And then I also have like these. So I would like to read these eventually too. So we'll see though. I would like to read them eventually, but who knows when. I mean, I'm still young, so I will read them all eventually. That's my goal because I love being in that world. I would like to read more of it. So, yeah. If you guys made it to the end of this video, I do appreciate it. Make sure you guys check out all my socials down below. And of course, you guys need to go check out Lord of the Rings. If you haven't read it, read it. Listen to it on audio. If you haven't watched the movie, which would be mind blowing if you haven't, you should definitely go watch the movie. Just saying, you should do both. Do them at the same time. That'd be awesome. I mean, if you watch the extended version of Lord of the Rings, it's like 14 hours long. So you could just read the books while watching it and probably finish both trilogies at the same time. That's an absolute win. But of course, last but not least, make sure you guys stay safe, stay hungry, and tell someone you love them. I'll see you guys in the next video. See ya!